Ladies and gentlemen, it is a very warm welcome to another episode of Off the Ruck, your weekly rugby breakdown with me, John Ferguson. And today, as you may be able to tell from the clothes that we're wearing and the jerseys that we're proudly repping, it is a Wallabies exclusive only edition. It is all about the green and gold. It is about the men that will represent us at a national level. And to break it all down and to predict the squads that we are wanting to see or that we think that Joe Schmidt will pick, I've got Lachie Gray here from Scrumbags. You see the boys on the media, on the Instagram, you see him on Spotify, Apple Music, and obviously on Instagram where they just pound you full of good rugby content. Lachie, a warm welcome to you, mate. Thank you for coming along.
No, thank you very much for inviting me. It's nice to pull in the green and gold again after a little while. It's been gathering a few dust bunnies in the cupboard, so looking forward to breaking it out for the Fiji game, which is so close now, John.
Yeah, mate, it is only a few weeks away, really. The 6th of July, that game, we're going to get straight into that test squad, which will be announced. Now, let's be transparent. We're recording this before the Brumbies play the Chiefs on Saturday afternoon, but I think nevertheless, the Brumbies' performance, there's no one really there that will necessarily play themselves into the squad. I think that, if anything, there's players bubbling around in the background. The Brumbies boys that have made it, pretty solid. That's what we feel, at least. So that's why we feel confident recording this now. Nevertheless, we hope that the Brumbies go well. And if you guys are watching this now on Sunday morning, you guys will know. So feel free to drop a little comment in the comment section below about how you feel about the Brumbies boys heading into the Gold and International Test window. But Lachie, should we get straight into the test selection?
Yeah, mate, keen as a bone. Let's go.
So, Lachie, we've pulled on the gold jersey. We would love to go out there, but we won't be representing. But what we are going to be doing today is pulling on the selector's jersey. And we're going to be looking and trying to peer into the brain of Joe Schmidt and see what he is going to select for that squad. We've picked 40-man squads. He says 30, he says 39, he says maybe a few more. It is kind of unclear at this stage. As with a lot of things with Joe Schmidt, probably would have been a great politician in another life, giving an all or nothing answer, but actually you end up getting a fair bit out of him. So that's not meant as a slight. It's just been very ambiguous about a lot of things for a while now. So let's go straight into that. We are going to pick a 40-man squad. You and I both picked 41 by accident prior. It's been so hard because there've been so many talented players. But Lachie, I think what we'll do is, I'm going to whip the squad up here, and we'll go with your squad first. This is the 40-man squad for the Fiji Test, which will be picked in either the couple of next days or the next week after the Brumbies hopefully go through to a final and win it. But if you have the squad there in front of you, we're just going to whack it up there. I want to first talk about your propping stocks. Talk to me through that, all right? Because there are we have some discrepancies, and I'll whip that up in a second. But just talk to me about your propping stocks.
It's a funny one for the front row because for me, it's the most important area of both the Fiji and the Lions series. We've seen what a good Fijian scrum can do over the past couple of years, right? So I think experience is crucial. I think combinations are crucial up front and across the whole paddock. So that's why I've gone with Slipper, Alatoa and Pollard. All that Brumbies trio goes straight into me. They have to be there, especially Slips and Allen. So key. And one of the few blokes in Slips who's played the Lions and knows what to expect. Angus Bell picks himself for me. I think BPA has also done enough over at the Force to get a look in there. And that's where it starts to get a little bit tight, those last few spots. So there were three scrum positions that were up for grabs to me. I've gone with Tom Robertson, who's in form over at the Force. I think we're going to see Matt Fazler.
Medal winner as well. So
yeah, exactly.
Important to note that he's been really impressive and clearly voted so by his peers. So that's a really good pick, and I think you couldn't really not pick him at this stage.
No, and with him and Slips too, Fergo, like players who can play both sides of the scrum, so important. Crucial. What happens if, go as over 10 in the third test, you need someone who can step up. I'd back those two to do so. So then it made it really interesting around the tight head role. So to have Slipper and Robertson in who can play both sides, I've picked them as loose heads, and I've gone with Taniela Tupou and Zane Nongor. Now, those were difficult to pick for me
Mm.
because you've got Zane Nonga, who for me is still unproven at test level and got exposed in his limited opportunities, but tight head's such a difficult spot for us at the moment. You've also got Taniel, who's out of form, but his ceiling is so much higher than Nonga's for mine. So I've found space for both of them, but for me, a lot rides on Bell, Alatoa, Slipper, and Robertson. Very keen to get your thoughts on some different picks because I've seen a few names on your list and they are very exciting.
Yeah, no, I'll whip up the graphic now where we see the big differences of your and my squad, and we'll go through that propping stock there. And I just couldn't find room for an inexperienced player like Nongor because this is a Lions test, and Schmidt knows this. You need to be picking players that are seasoned, that have done it at test level, or have been extremely impressive at Super Rugby level, and that's why I've found a place for Aiden Ross from the Chiefs, who is signed to the Queensland Reds after the season and who is Australia eligible. Many people may not know that. They may have been keeping a pulse on that earlier in the season when the talk was originally started. There was a few articles in and around it, particularly on the Raw, but now that is still very much a reality. And I've put a little asterisk there next to the name of Kai Leah as well, because without Aiden Ross, I think that someone like Kalia, although he hasn't started for the Wallabies, he doesn't. You don't just drop off the face of the map, particularly as a prop. It's different when you're a playmaker like the likes of Tane Edmed, but because he's had a rough run. But I think that for Kalia, he hasn't forgotten how to scrummage. He hasn't forgotten how to run the ball, and he is a really strong defender. And that is my little sneaky way of getting 41 in the 40-man squad because I just can't split those. And it is and I know there's strong candidates like Tom Lambert, like Nongor on the other side of the scrum. But I just felt that having someone that had been part of the Schmidt ecosystem was really important in Kylea, but Aiden Ross, he's experienced enough to be able to come in and pick things up, particularly as a third string, is what I'd say. Third string. He could start, but he's third string loose head prop. So that's where I've gone there. I don't think we'll go through this side row for row and side by side. We'll whip them up and people will be able to read the differences and the sides that we have both chosen. But I think we'll go next to the hookers chronologically just because that's where we do have some differences. And I'll just let you know that we have picked again some differences, but I think you and I have both gone for four hookers. So why four hookers? And then also why did you pick Dolly from the Force, which is a great pick?
Yeah, I think you're right. The Pollards and the BPAs seemingly we're going to pick themselves just on form and the amount of miles under the legs this year. A BPA particularly for his scrummaging. You know, you've got a bigger body, you've got a man who's won a top 14 title, who's experienced in the Northern Hemisphere style, and Pollard's combination I think gets him in that slipstream with Triple A and slips. Fazla I needed to find space for because he was the incumbent and he's still I think Australia's best performing hooker in the international scene over the past 2 years. So we need to have space for him, even though he's come back from injury. Dolly is the cover, or almost the insurance for Fazla, should Fazla go down. And he's also there on form in the sense that Dolly and BPA pretty much split game time. I reckon BPA's got his nose in front by a little. I haven't got the numbers in front of me, Fergo. Maybe you've seen them. But I was so impressed by Dolly's set piece performance, good core roles, and he's a person who can push and also mimic a lot of what we might see from the Lions in that squad training camp. You've got a fellow who's been through the English system and been capped for England. That's a man who was able to put up a really good fight in and around the training paddock. It's almost those players in the squad who train. They are as important, if not more so, than some of the players who'll actually wear the gold because you are preparing your team. And Dolly's the perfect kind of person to prepare the Wallabies and fill a role if needed.
Yeah, I think you have hit the nail on the head there, and they are attributes. And I'll just say again, these are things that we think Joe Schmidt will be looking at when he's selecting his squad. Experience, chief among them, which you were noting there. He's been around the traps, and he's done it in the Northern Hemisphere, as you say, has been a test hooker. For the very much the same reasons that you've said there about Dolly, I've put in Parecki instead, and it's more so about Dolly. I see as an all-rounder. If the people, the cricket fans out there, and he's an all-rounder. But for Parecki, I particularly see him as a defensive player. He is a defensive player in the mindset that he is a great and excellent chop tackler, great work rate, and really nails his key roles. Where I think Dolly actually is perhaps a little bit better of a bit more of an offensive player, in that his carry is probably a bit better than Brerecki's. But nonetheless, Porecki is such an experienced campaigner, has been through the Wallabies system for the last couple of years, and he's also played a lot with a lot of these boys, where Dolly hasn't played with anyone of the Wallaby potentials, except for scrummaging, except for next to Tom Robinson, which you and I both have in our squads, where Dave Porecki has scrummed with all the would-be props, bar Aiden Ross, which would be the case for everyone. So I do think that that leans puts the ball in his favor, or puts the odds in his favor rather, and so that's why I've gone with him, and that's why I think Schmidt may go with him. But nevertheless, two really good candidates, and it's really intriguing to see, because I do think hooker is one of those positions that Schmidt will actually pick for, as opposed to just picking the three, because you have two on game day, and if one goes down, you all of a sudden you don't have anyone there. And in a 40-man squad going into Fiji, I don't really see the point of not having more players than less. So that's why we've gone 40-man, and also that's why I've put four players there, and I think that's the reason you did so as well. In the second row, I went with five players, but you went with six because you found a spot for Josh Canham. Talk to me about that decision, because I've got some stats on Canham, so I'll rep those out for you. But which I think a lot of the viewers will be really interested to hear. But why did you pick Canham, and why do you think Schmidt will pick Canham?
Yeah, Canham's a bit of a trump card for me, not in the sense that I think he will start against the Lions. In fact, don't think we're going to see much of him in the Lions series itself, but another preparation player that I think Joe would identify as saying, here's something that we may see from the Lions. Here is a very good line disruptor, not the best defensive line out operators like Swain and Williams, but Canham is probably the most athletic up there with Nick Frost from what we've seen, and a man who can get an offload three, who can be very dangerous in the carry. I think he's there as a preparation player in Joe's eyes. And for that reason, and just adding extra forward and extra bulk through that 40-man squad, we want to see as many contested scrums, as many contact and as many collision, replications and scenarios as possible in the lead up. So I think having an extra second rower is key to achieve that and realize that. And Canham, for mine, is the kind of player that you can't find elsewhere. So he gets a role in Joe's predictor squad for that purpose. I don't see him playing a major international role for Honest Virgo.
Yeah, no, and I think all those reasons are valid. It's been really interesting to see him grow this year and play with the Reds, because obviously he went up with his Rebels teammate Lukan Salakai-Loto. Obviously, they went on the field too much together just because Lukan was injured for a lot of the season, unfortunately. But nonetheless, that's comforting, having someone that you've played alongside with for a while. Obviously, a Brizzy boy originally, I believe, or a Queensland man originally. So he might have some partnerships back the way with some other Queenslanders. But I do think that it's hard to come into the Wallabies environment and only know one or two of the boys having actually locked down with them consistently. And that's kind of the reason why I omitted him, because I think someone like Tom Hooper, who I've named in the back row, which we'll get to in just a second, has probably locked down and played with a few more of the boys in the squad. So and he's been playing so well, and he's playing there for the Brumbies tonight. In the second row as opposed on the side. And he's actually played a little bit of 8 as well. Now that he's got that bit of aggro about him, he's been able to really dominate that sort of element of his own game, which he hasn't really found previously. I'd just like to go back to the front row previously, because I think we do need to address it, and it'd be remiss if we didn't. Taniela Tupou, I had to find a spot for him, and I think Schmidt will find a spot for him, because Schmidt trusts Mike Cron, the scrum coach, and he'll believe that he can get the best out of Tupou, and Tupou's ceiling is bigger than any of the props that we have in our squad. Actually, it's the biggest one out of any prop that they'll face in this entire Lions series. There is no prop in that Lions team that can fold a Taniela Tupou when he's on song. I wholeheartedly believe that, and I think we have the metrics to back that up. So, I had to include him because you have to believe that he will be able to fire, and if he does, that could be game-changing. But a quick comment on that, because that's the reason why I believe Schmidt will include him in the squad.
Yeah, agree on those points, Fergo. And also, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but preparation. You have one of the best scrummaging tight heads in the world on his day. You've seen what he's been capable of, even out of form this year with New South Wales. His scrummaging has been his highlight. Work rate, down. Defensive efforts, down. Contributions with the ball, way down. But scrummaging, that has remained his core role, his chief role through the TARS, and he's done it well. The numbers back that up. So
Yeah.
I think to have him in camp, to remind him that on his day he is one of the world's best tight heads, and to get him in that environment is the best thing for Tupou. He's a confidence player. So I reckon you're right. Schmidt can see a way to get the best out of him, have him around camp, prepare for the Fiji test, and who knows, we could see a massive return in this series.
Yeah, no, fingers crossed. I think Paul Collier of the Sydney Morning Herald wrote that Taniela Tupou will be a headline from the Lions series. Good or bad, yet to be seen, but I think you and I both agree on that. It's definitely going to be a headline that will be written. Then just going back to, I know we're jumping a little bit over the spot here, but we'll go back to Canham. I've crunched the numbers across all the squad members that I believe that are in there. You and I had pretty strong squads, as in correlation and pretty similar picks. But on Canham, he is he is amongst Williams, Frost, Skelton, Swain, and Canham. He is either fourth or fifth in that list of five for the majority of attacking stats, except for ruck efficiency, where he is hitting at 84.4%, which he's the second best. So he's the second most effective lock when it comes to cleaning rucks on attacking ball. But then if you go to the defense, and this is where he makes up his bit more of a split, he's either third or second for most defensive stats. So that is tackle success rate, dominant hits, tackling hips or lower, which we know that Joe Schmidt loves, turnover tackle, breakdown steals, and ruck effectiveness on the defensive ball. So how effective are you to disrupt an opposition's ruck? So he is a split player because I've listed in this list of data set that I've compiled offensive and defensive player. He's a little bit more towards defensive, but I think we've seen that because in the carry, he does stand up quite straight and is still a little bit young in the body, if we may say so, that he's still trying to find his bulk particularly at the highest level. So it's a really interesting way to look at players, and I'll go through some of those stats with you through the key back row players as well, and some of the backline players. And I think we'll go straight to the back row because I think you and I, again, have a little bit of a, not difference, I think we're the exact same here almost, but Seru Uru was someone that I really wanted to find a spot for, but I just haven't been able to with the 40-man cap. Look, if Schmidt goes 41 players, he's my first player in there, guaranteed. But I just couldn't find a spot for him because I have gone so many back rowers already. You and I both have McReight, Tizzano, Champion de Crepney, Gleeson, Wilson, Valentini. I just couldn't find a spot amongst all that, But then again, you think like, you'd love to have him there, but why don't you think Schmidt will pick him, and why didn't you manage to squeeze him in there?
No, I didn't squeeze in Seru for the tests because of the nature of a Lions series. They are not fast-flowing, loose games. They're not easily broken apart. We've seen through every series that I can go back to remembering. I think the first I watched avidly would have been 2009. And these Lions test matches are won on minuscule moments. They're not won from a offload at the back. They're not won from a wild move. They're won on pure grit and graft. Seru is an excellent player who we'll see more of in a Wallabies jersey, but I just don't think his style of play is suited to a Joe Smith plan to take down the Lions. Nor is he part of, I think, a preparation in my mind. That's where the de Crepneys come in. Yes, you've got an uncapped player, but he's a man who plays 6, 7, 8 and beats the shit out of people for a living. He is a defensive monster. So I think that's where it comes in. And that for me was the pick. Does a de Crepney come in to best prepare the Wallabies, or does Uru's gameplay and attacking play in particular get him over the line? For me, it's de Crepney for the former reasons, and it's something that we've mentioned before. I'm going to sound incredibly boring throughout this, but so much of the squad's core role is to prepare the 23 to beat the Lions, and that's why de Crepney just edged ahead for me. And also, we didn't mention him earlier, but we've both picked Will Skelton, and that soaks up a big locking role because then Tom Hooper drops back in. Potentially if Will Skelton's not available, maybe Hooper stays as a second rower and Seru slots in there. So I found it interesting that we both sort of picked Skelton without too much fuss, and I think it's pretty clear why. You've got a multiple championship winner who's captain the Wallabies and weighs $150 on a good day. It's something very nice down on the tight head side of the scrum.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you mentioned it because I think I'm going to go back to my stat table here. Out of the five locks that I put under the microscope, only one of them's overseas, so that being Will Skelton. He is either first or second for all attacking stats bar ruck effectiveness, and he's also either first or second for all defensive stats except for tackling hips or lower. He is an absolute monster. So let me just put it this way. He carries dominantly 44.7% of the time. The closest carrier is 43.3%, which is Jeremy Williams from the Western Force, the captain there. If you go to committing two tacklers or more, then you've got Will Skelton at 80.4% of the time. The next closest carrier is Nick Frost, which is at 55. You have a 25% difference. Like the numbers are just insane. I'm going to keep going through them because I want people to understand how much of an impact having Will Skelton in your team makes. So for ruck effectiveness, he only hits at 75.7%. Now, the highest percentage is Jeremy Williams, who I think will be his locking partner to start the test at 86.1. So that's a 9%, 11% difference, which is quite high. He's the only one. Him and Darcy Swain are in the 70s percentages. Canham, Frost, Williams, all in the 80 percentages. Now, if we go to the defensive side, he tackles at 90.6%, the second highest most effective success rate out of all the five locks. He also hits dominant tackles 10.9% of the time. The second most dominant percentage hit by a lock is Darcy Swain at 7.3. That's a 3% gap. That is absolutely massive. And then if we go to ruck effectiveness, it's actually Josh Canham. Oh no, sorry, it's Darcy Swain, at 22.8%. He is overly effective at the defensive ruck. And then the next closest is Will Skelton at 12.8. So you can see where certain locks have their pros, their cons, or rather they're better or worse. Will Skelton, Nick Frost, Jeremy Williams, all offensive players. Will Skelton, he can do it all, but he's an extremely impressive offensive player. So, it's no wonder that he's in there. It's no wonder that you and I have been able to pick the numbers there. And I think anyone who has an argument against Will Skelton just has to look at these numbers and see that he's doing it in the French top 14, which I honestly believe is the hardest league to win in the world in club rugby. That's a chat for another day. We'll go on to the back row, and I think that we have to look at someone like Tizzano. Like he's just so mega, and obviously he was going to be there. But you and I have only picked two out and route sevens. Why no Luke Reimer?
I think there's a pretty clear distinction between the top two fetchers in Australia and the rest this year. I've actually been more impressed with Rory Scott than Luke Reimer down at the Brumbies, to be honest. But it's not just about the fact that Tizzano smashed the tries record. That's actually the least impressive part of his game for mine. His work rate and his improved carry with the ball has been magnificent this year. My qualm with Tizzano heading into 2025 would have been how effective are you with the ball? Because you are a smaller body. We saw all the stuff about him, sending Joe Schmidt photos of him on the scale saying, I'm 100 now, you can pick me and stuff like that.
I love that.
He's great. He's a character, but he does play above his weight now. Which is awesome to see. He's not just sort of like a Heinrich Brousseau limpet only kind of player. He's got chops with the ball, which is great to see. So it's a great shootout. It's a great problem to have, him and McReight. I still think McReight edges ahead through link play and combination with Wilson, who I see as likely eighth man. But you've got to have them both. Reimer, he's shown bits and bobs through the year. I don't think he's captivated people the same way he did through Super Rugby 2024. Which led to his debut against the Springboks in Brisbane, from memory. But geez, we've got some depth in that area, Fergo.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do think, like you're saying, he hasn't truly captivated the imagination of the Australian people, nor do I think that he's necessarily done that with the selectors for the Wallabies either. A quick comment on that from a stat perspective. Tizzano is winning the attacking stats by quite a bit. from the seven. So that's out of I collated McReight, Tizzano, and Reimer. Reimer is very much a defensive player, which does lead a lot of those stats. And McReight is split 50-50 almost. He does everything a little bit better. The fetching is the one thing that he does better than both players. That's for sure. And so that's been really interesting to say. To see rather, because we know this, but then to put it into numbers, it's good to see that. But on your comments about Tizzano playing well over his weight, he carries a dominant gain line carry 64.9% of the time compared to Reimer's 57.8 and McReight's 53.8. So he is 11% higher almost than McReight, and about 8% higher, 6 or 7% higher than Reimer. So he is truly an attacking threat now, and that's something that will really alleviate the pressure of a Bell, Valentini, Skelton, and then also in the backs as well, which we haven't quite got to yet. But I think we should say that Nick Champion de Crepney, as you've mentioned before, in both our squads for the 40-man squad, extremely impressive first season in Super Rugby, back in Australia. And I can't wait to see him in a gold jersey. I do think we'll see him there. We'll see if it's for the Fiji Test. If Joe Schmidt brings him along just to bash some bodies and to make sure that Fijians don't come around the corner and whack our blokes. But that's yet to be seen. We'll head straight to the back line, and we have a split decision here as well, because I have gotten for 3 halfbacks. You have gone with 3 as well, but you've picked Ryan Lonergan ahead of the old bull and the former Brumby, Nick White. I was shocked at this. I thought you might have gone 4 and sacrificed numbers elsewhere, but you were like, you know what? Schmidt's seen enough from Lonergan. So why Lonergan? Why now?
This is one of the tough ones, Fergo. I think the way Joe Schmidt will go is it's probably going to be Nick White, but the way I've rationalised it is that combinations are so key, especially with a limited runway. And we've seen Lonergan and Lachie combine very effectively throughout the season for the Brumbies. We're seeing a deep run into finals now. We're not sure how far on they're going to go, but combined with Lonergan's capacity to long-range goal kick, which is something that Nick White has as well, a little bit younger, a little bit faster, better service and all-round game. I think of the Nines, Lonergan's all-round game is superior. And that's the reason I think he's going to get his nose in front in Joe Schmidt's eyes. Not a knock on Nick White, who's done amazing things in the gold jersey, but White playing in a potential combination over at the 4th and also getting experience through will not discount him from featuring later on. I think this is the time we're going to see Ryan Lonergan get his chops in gold.
Yeah, I mean, he has done almost everything he could to be able to earn that spot, and I do think that in 2025 he absolutely will. I just don't know if it's for the Lions or for this Fiji Test leading into it. But that was when I saw that, my eyes lit up, because I want him to make it as well, and I do think Schmidt wants him to make it as well. It just depends on how he chooses and when he chooses for that to happen. I think the biggest bombshell is that I've actually left Tom Liner out of my squad. I can't see him for a Fiji side or the Lions. They are going to be throwing everything at the Wallabies, and you need to be physically resolute. And I'm not particularly saying that Loloseo and Donaldson and James O'Connor, which you've named and I have named in the 10s jersey. So I think a lot of people will be happy about that. Not necessarily surprised, but still, it's weird to see James O'Connor's name on the Wallabies selection page after such a long time out of the picture. For James O'Connor, who's been playing the game now professionally for over a decade. But I really do think that Tom Liner's physicality has been an issue and frailty, and I don't say that lightly, but he has been shown to be coming off with concussion and head knocks quite often this season. And against the Lions, like you've mentioned before in the forward pack, it's just going to be attritional, and you need to be up for that. And I just am a little bit unsure whether Liner is old enough or experienced enough to be in that position. But you've still selected him, and you selected James O'Connor, but I'll get your thoughts first on Liner.
Yeah, Fergo, for me, Liner's one of the players that is, on the cusp. He's that tough choice, and I think O'Connor edges out there for experience, for his ability to close out games, ad nauseum about the stuff he does with the Crusaders. But he's been doing it for a long time, for a lot of different clubs in a lot of different positions. The versatility that O'Connor has is also key to getting in front of Liner, I think, in that pecking order. But I weigh up the concerns around Liner's physicality, which I think are largely unfounded. Like his actual contact and his tackle is quite sound, but the head knocks sort of balance that out. This is becoming all too frequent. I weigh up that with his excellent goal kicking. And we know how tough Lion series can be. We've seen it's series won and lost on it, most recently in Australia in first two tests. So
Shout out KB.
shout out KB and big old Lee Halfpenny, who's coming out with the legends. But I think, Liner can sink them from all over the park. I think he's got the most technically sound action. He has the least amount of shape in his kick as well. And it's something that will be weighing heavily on minds. Noel Lasser has been kicking them very well. You might have the stats, but I reckon he's kicking above 80 this year. I dare say the only Australian kicker to hit him better is Liner through 2025.
Yeah, no, you're putting me on the spot, but I tell you what, Lolasia was not hitting him particularly well early doors. And then he's come good at the back end of the season. Line has been extremely consistent, and you're right to point it out because I have written several times myself that this Lion series could be won and lost off the boot. So that's definitely not to be discredited. I guess it's just whether you can stay on the paddock long enough to be able to make the boot count, I guess, are you going to be on there till the 79th minute? And if not, is that going to be a null and void point? That's the reason why we're having these chats, and that's, I'm sure, the same chats that Joe Schmidt is going to be having along with Ian Toulon, his analyst, and obviously Lord Laurie Fisher and Mike Cron, as well as Jeff Parling for the Wallaby Selections World, which will be happening. Those conversations are happening as we're having these conversations. A piece of paper is probably floating around somewhere with a list almost ready to go. So I think that the point and thing to say about centers is really that we again have a little bit of a split decision here. You and I both have picked Josh Fluke from the Reds. Who's an outside centre who can play a little bit all over utility. And then we've also got Hamish Stewart from the Force, who was part of Joe Schmidt's squad last year. No spot for Joey Walton. I thought that was a bit harsh based on his season. But again, the Lions is not an opportunity to prove yourself in a gold jersey. You need to be demanding that jersey. And I don't necessarily think that Josh Fluke and Hamish Stewart are going to be starting any tests. And you and I have a bit of a split decision about where we're actually picking Joseph Akuso Suaalii, the Ferrari that is, and a little bit about where we're going to be picking Iki Tau as well. But nonetheless, we have roughly the same centers. But I've picked Samu Kerevi because, again, this is not an opportunity for young players to prove themselves in a gold jersey or to get a feel for it. We need players who have been there, who have done that, and who are really able to explode and do a great job in a gold jersey. And I think that if Schmidt gets Kerevi in camp for the Fiji Test, has, 3-4 weeks with him, then able to be able to head into that test. Maybe he does play center, maybe he doesn't. But then we also get that opportunity to get more. Schmidt gets an opportunity to get tactile with Kerevi to be able to really suss him out, because it's something that coaches have done after players have come back from Japan, and to test them out in a rigorous environment for a test window call-up. So that's why I've picked Kerevi. I think that he has the bulk and experience, particularly the bulk, should one of our centers go down, to be able to really plug a hole, which we will have if that happens, because I think center is one of the thinnest stocked positions rather in the Australian squad and in the Australian ecosystem. And I think that's why Kerevi there. I think another harsh one that I left out is David Feliwai. I know that Schmidt likes the cut of his jib, but I just couldn't find a spot with him, with Fluke being more versatile and Stewart obviously having a really good season for the Western Force. Talk me through your selections and why you think that Schmidt might go the way that you've gone.
Yeah, well, we've got basically the bang on same, except you've added in Kerevi. And Kerevi for me is your SOS. And I don't want to have to rely on Samu Kerevi. I don't think Joe Schmidt wants to have to rely on him either. Playing Division 2 footy in Japan isn't exactly the best preparation. It's not a knock on Samu. He had some great performances in the promotion relegation games, a couple of tries. He's been strong on the carry all year, but there's a very big difference between running up against an 80-kilo Japanese inside and Bundy Aki.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly horses for courses there. I just think the primary centre combination that Joe ran with against England, which is the Ikitau Suaalii, will form the crux of the selections around them. And if Len becomes your primary 12, which I think is going to be the case, I don't see room for Karevi in that. You've got Paisami, who's more of a aggressive role player. Hamish Stewart is an excellent defensive 12. He's got his detractors, but my goodness, some of the games he's played this year in Force colours, he's kept them in the fight with his pilfer game, with his low chops. He is criminally underrated. So again, another important preparation player. Fluke's versatility, you're right. It just sheked out Feluai and Karevi, and I just think with some of the other selections like that we'll get into on the wings, we've got players who cover the centres as well. In fact, we've both selected two players who can cover centre, and I think that's given me the right amount of balance for a Joe Schmidt midfield.
No, I totally agree. And I think the reason why I went Karevi there is just because of that size. If you start looking at a backline without certain personnel from the starting side, which I think you and I both are in agreement of, which we'll get to in just a second, you start looking pretty light on. And the Lions are going to have bulky players and powerful wingers. You're going to need stopping power, and sometimes body weight and mass is all that really can do that, bar really, really solid technique. So Karevi was there for that choice. I do just want to highlight that you may not think this, but Josh Fluke has the highest gain line carry percentage by a mile out of the centers. He is running gain line at 80%. The closest behind him is Paisami at 68.2. So a whole 12% ahead of him. That probably comes down to his ability to run a line, which I think is really impressive. And he has a good rugby IQ and nous. I think that you start looking at dominant hits and stuff like that, then you get the Paisamis coming in and the Iki Taus and but as far as dominant carries go, Fluke and Paisami are quite a fair bit ahead. Iki Tau and Stewart as well. Stewart is very much the odd one out when it comes to those four centers. Comparing them, I couldn't get my hands on the stats for Karevi, so that was a bit of a shame. But again, I don't really think I would have compared him anyway because he's playing a very different standard of rugby, so that would have been a bit unfair. All the centres were very much split players, though. None were more offensive than defensive. I think that Iki Tau's numbers surprised me, but they're just obviously the ones that I'm looking at. But tackle evasion, which is something that I looked at for the backs, and the best person at evading tackles was actually Stewart, surprisingly enough. And then after that, it was Iki Tau, which I don't think comes to no surprise. Yes, Fluke was the worst. Paisami was the second worst. So really interesting split when you start looking at the numbers and the perceptions that you have of players, but then also what they're actually putting out and the numbers that make up who they are on the pitch. So center combinations done and dusted. Back three, we'll go through this, we'll whip through this, and then we'll go through who will drop from the 40-man squad to the 38-man squad for the Lions, from the Fiji squad to the Lions squad. But in the wings, you and I picked all the same wings, and I think there was just a little bit of difference about where we were going in terms of utility. So if I was to pick a squad, I'd pick Andrew Kellaway and Suaalii as utilities. I know some people may not like those words, but I do think that Andrew Kellaway genuinely does cover 15 and 14, and Suaalii covers 15 wing and centre really well, and I wouldn't say that Dangunu is capable of that same type of versatility. I think that Kellaway is equally adept at 15 and wing, but Dangunu is not as equally adept at 13 and wing at test level. Super Rugby, different gravy, but yeah. So I think the biggest thing here is what we're all waiting on is the health and the evidence that Max Jorgensen is going to be able to start a test. Because for me, that really, really matters to see that. He says that he's looking good. He's been running. He's doing a bit of contact work here and there, along with Joseph Akuso Suaalii. So Suaalii is going to be back. He said so himself in a press conference this week. He's looking good. But Harry Potter, he's the one that I really want to talk about. You and I both selected him, and I think that many people at the start of the year thought it was going to be Dylan Peach who was actually going to be steaming away with form this year, but it's been his wing partner at the Force, Harry Potter. He's been just immense in a losing side. What excites you about him, and why do you think that he has done enough to snake a starting spot for the Wallabies?
Well, Fergo, if Harry Potter's playing for the Brumbies, you've already penciled him in the 14 jersey. Like the form that he's demonstrated in a team that's gone backwards in the back half of their season even in those losing performances, you saw the 2-game tour of New Zealand that the Force played. He was unbelievable against the Chiefs and the Blues. Some spectacular tries against the run of play, doing it off his own back, aerially very sound, physically so strong. He's the perfect combination of height and aggression, very safe pair of hands too. Like he does his core skills right. And coincidentally, also someone who's able to cover that 13 channel. So and a little bit of extra versatility as well. I think he's the perfect test winger. And you're right about Peach. I too expected Peach to be the breakout star, but injuries have cruelled him, and the big HP is slotted straight in there. So for me, he starts a test against Fiji, and he's in the front seat to be a starting winger against the Lions. You raised Jorgensen quickly, who I want to mention before you give me a take on Potter, because Max is the great unknown. If he is back to form, someone who can cover wing and fullback, he is almost your perfect 23 as coverage if you do go a 5-3 split. But at the moment, I think the physicality of players like Filippo Dungunu and Harry Potter lend themselves to a Lions series. Max Jorgensen is not the biggest man. He does play big, but, I think he's probably dropping 15, 20 kilos on the likes of Potter and Dungunu. So you're right. Like what you said for Karevi, size can matter. And I think it will in that test arena. I'm very keen for your take on Harry Potter. I know you're high on him too.
No, you can't not be. He's absolutely stellar. And it's not only the fact that he has a good rugby IQ on him, the man's rapid. And I think so many people forget how fast he is. That guy genuinely, I reckon, rivals Corey Toole and Max Jorgensen for who's quickest in the squad. I think someone did last year say that Jorgo's pretty quick even when Toole was in and around the squad running races and whatnot. But Potter's not far behind him, and that genuine turn of pace is something that the Lions actually lack. Duan Merva, he's quick. James Lowe, he's powerful. Mac Hansen, he's skillful and versatile. And then Tommy Freeman, he's a little bit of an all-rounder, quite a big lad. They are not speedsters. Someone like Imani Boso, I'd be scared of someone like him who has power, speed, and aggression, but I think that if you put a Harry Potter in a running race with those Lions wingers, I reckon he's going to be doing a pretty good job. Maybe a bit of a different story against the Fijian wingers like Celestino Ravataumunda, Pongani Langanamasi, and so et cetera, so forth. But against the Lions side, that kind of speed matters. And I think that's where the Lions have gone with big wingers. We've got to go with some IQ, high IQ players and some speedsters. So that's why I've picked Potter and why I think he's going to be such an integral part. I think that Jorgensen's probably likely to play that Waratahs game as opposed to the Fiji game, and he's probably going to be good for that Wallabies test should Schmidt want him there, and should he have seen enough out of him in camp. Because I just think the form that Jorgensen was in prior his syndesmosis injury there at the hands of Braden Yosse against the Hurricanes in round 4 or 5, I think it was, that was such a shame because he was absolutely killing it, and the Waratahs game plan was pass it to Jorgo, and then it moved to pass it to Suaalii. It was a real shame, really, to see his injury. Such a young player with his stuff. It's quite significant injuries already, but he's too talented to ignore. And then I think that the only out-and-out fullback you and I both really selected was Tom Wright. Suaalii can play there. Jorgensen can play there. Kellaway can play there. On Kellaway, I just want to say that he is purely in the squad for the money in the bank, for the reps in the bank, because he has been borderline atrocious for the Waratahs, and I don't say that lightly because he is one of my favorite out-and-out players. High IQ, has really, really grafted his way into a Wallabies jersey, and he deserves it. He's deserved every single minute he's gotten, and last year he was extremely impressive. So maybe he's going to lift at test level with a better side around him and a better system, but he was tackling at something like 67%. You just can't have that. He was the worst by a lot, and I can say that, on fact. It's just not good enough, and it's particularly against the Lions side with powerful wingers. You can't be afford to be missing tackles one-on-one when you're just slipping off them, and if you're too slow to get to them. So he's in there purely by his rep alone, but I do think that he'll lift in a test jersey. Can I just get your quick take on Kells, because it's been tough to watch him as one of my favorite wingers?
It has. I think him along with Peach, they're both on the outer for us for different reasons. Yes, they're in the squad, but they're the two outside backs who are probably least likely to feature at this stage. You're right. Kellaway's a long way from the player that really shot to acclaim sort of 2021 and 2022. Great performances against the All Blacks, physical, really compact running and elusive. We just haven't seen it.
Mm.
And yes, that's a product of the Tars season itself, especially the back end. But yeah, he slid a long way down that pecking order. I think you need him for the experience. And if Peachy, he's another unknown. If he can get back from injury, he is so effective, particularly defensively. Probably up there with Dalgona as the strongest wingers over the ball and able to apply defensive pressure. But it's those are the two players who I think would be on the outer for Joe.
Absolutely, I agree. I think Peach is a physical kind of player that you need in the squad, particularly in an undersized Wallaby backline. Those are the combinations and plays that you end up picking. But again, a little bit of a question mark over how you fit him in. Should you need to cut players, and that's where we're going to go right now. So now we've been able to talk to you about the 40-man squad, and then now we're going to talk to you about the 38-man British and Irish Lions squad that we think that Joe Schmidt is going to pick. Now, the reason why we've gone down to 38 is because it makes as much sense for Joe Schmidt to have a broad stroke brush on a lot of players to be able to get across and see them in training, and then to be able to hone down on who he really wants over those 3 weeks. Yes, injuries may be part of it. They will be a part of it, sorry. But nevertheless, Joe Schmidt will be wanting to work detail into the lads, review really hard about the players that are going to be playing. And playing week after week is not something new to these players. They do it for the whole year almost, except for in that TRC window. It is going to be so important that almost the same 23 play each week, and there's only going to be minor rotation for the cohesion and for the improvement and for the building of the squad. So I think with that mindset, from looking outside into a Joe Schmidt environment is going to be why I think we're going to go down from 40 for the Fijian test. He's going to cast the wide net, and then he's going to go down to 38 to be able to cover those crucial positions with more players. And now, Lachie, talk to me about the two players that you're cutting from your 40-man Fiji squad to the 38-man squad. Obviously, this is before any injuries are reported and before any of that. This is purely off form and where we think that the combinations are working. Who are you going to cut from your 40-man squad for the Fiji squad through to the Lions squad for the 38-man squad?
Yeah, it's a funny one, Fergo. As you talk through the episode, you almost start changing as well. But I'll stick with what I've put down. I think Peach is one to go. Just hasn't had the miles under the legs. Will be great to get him across detail because he can be such an important player in those outside backs. But again, an area of depth. That's why he drops out for me. And it's the same for our champion de Crepney. I still think the more through this episode, I'm thinking potentially it could be Canham. Canham's the one that goes. I know I said that before, that he's someone who is there for detail and preparation. De Crepney plays a similar role, just being an absolute mongrel at the ruck. He'd be an awful person to train against. You get the feeling. But I think those are the likeliest two at this stage to drop out. Having a surplus of hookers and halfbacks to me is so important, and playmakers, just for reps to get everyone across detail. Back row and outside back is something that we have the depth to cover pre-existing. So for me, it's de Crepney and Peach, the Force boys.
Yeah, and I think that's a really valid point about kind of depth, haven't really got the miles in the legs, and it's going to be really hard to see where those boys kind of fit in. It's all, particularly de Crepney as a debutant. It's really tough. You and I have picked very few debutants. You obviously picked de Crepney as I did. I've picked Ross. You've picked Dolly. It's a little bit, there's a few in there. Even Canham isn't even a debutant, having played that game against Argentina. So it's it's going to be tough to see a debutant. I did predict at the start of the year there'd be two debutants. I picked two debutants in my squad. But I'm also going to be dropping one of my debutants, and that's de Crepney. For the same reason that you outlined, but also because I believe that the second row / back row options with Lukan Salagaia-Loto, Jeremy Williams, then you also have Tom Hooper. Those players can go in and out, back and forth between the second and the back row. And I'm just unsure whether de Crepney, who hasn't been in the system, is necessarily going to be utilized and needed for those reasons. You'd rather be getting the rest of the squad get involved and get reps through the training camps and through the weeks. And then the second player that I've actually dropped, and this may actually surprise you, is Hamish Stewart. I just think that he's the back because I think that you need more forwards. I think that it's going to be a forward heavy, as all squads are, but I think that you can't drop too many forwards, particularly in the front row. I don't really have a whole lot of fat to drop in the second row because I've picked 5, unlike your 6. And then in the back row, you and I both have dropped 1, so we've gone with 7 back rowers for 3 spots, but you rotate in. You need 2 on the bench potentially if you're playing a 6-2 split, even a 7-1 split. You need more of them. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Joe Schmidt goes about that throughout the Lions series. 6-2 split, very possible and very likely in a Lions, and I think that's actually more likely from an Andy Farrell perspective than it is from a Wallabies perspective, just because he's got the players that can play a little bit all over. So he could start a Marcus Smith at 15 and not have to carry an extra fly half on the bench. We don't really have that kind of luxury. But nevertheless, back to the Wallabies squad at hand. Stewart's just not in there because he just doesn't have the X factor or the size, or he doesn't have any particular. It's not so much that he doesn't have any. He has very few negatives. He just doesn't have all too many positives, if I may put it like that. So no knock on him. I think he's a great player. Fluke is just in there purely for his utility, and I think that he actually genuinely can play 13 and either of the wings should he need to, and he has the kind of pace to be able to do that, where I don't think Stewart has that actual pace to be able to compete at a test level. Could definitely do it at Super. That's just my rationale around it. And then now, Lachie, we're going to go straight into picking our team for that test against Fiji, all injuries permitting. Let's go.
You get to pick the first team of the year. You get to put your selector's cap on. It's wonderful. I feel like I should be wearing chinos and a pair of RMs for this kind of stuff. Virgo. It's a I've got a 6-2 split. I know we talked about it just before, but I feel like the weight, particularly of excellent second and back rowers that we need to try and utilize. I love the idea of it more than the application because I haven't seen it applied well by an Australian team. So this is far from a bomb squad, but I think this could be a really excellent 23 to roll at. So we go with a tried and tested and well-performing starting pack. Bell, Pollard, Alatoa, combinations in the locking with Frost and Hooper. Valentini, McReight and Wilson are a pretty settled back row, from my opinion. This is where it gets interesting. I'd love to see Ryan Lonergan on debut against the Fijians. You're right, he's paid his
I don't think you're alone there.
Skippered Australia so many times, proven performer in finals, plus the goal kicking. I think he's got to have that combination with Lachie. You can't throw Lonergan in with another 10. I think that would be unfair on both those players. So love to see them together in the halves. Ikitau and Surley, the Twickenham Terrors, get them in there. Dungunu and Potter, physical wingers. Tom Wright picks himself at fullback on form. And then our 6-2 split. You can see it up on your screens as well, but I really want the experience of James Slipper off the back, partnering with BPA and his force partner, Nathan Sharp medalist Tom Robertson. Let's see Will Skelton, back end of the second half, maybe 30 to go, bolstering that scrum. Williams for extra line-out coverage when Skelton's on. Let Carlo rip, the mad dog himself, and then plenty of coverage with James O'Connor, who's able to cover 10, 12, 15. We've also seen him play every other position at test level. So
even 13. I think he might have played 13 against the Lions.
No, I remember he played 10 against the Lions, and we've seen him in 13 for Sale when he was playing over there for a long time as well. So, I mean, if you want a person to cover 10 to 15, there is no better player in Australian rugby than James O'Connor, nor someone more experienced. So that's what I'd love to see, but I know that you've got a different 23, John.
Yeah, I do, but I'm really glad that you've been so confident and you've just gone out there with your side. Because it is a really good side, and I think you and I have a lot. You and I have maybe a 10 to 5% difference in the squads overall. I think we have a much closer squad, game day squad coming up for this. So I've gone Bell, Fassler, Alatoa in the front row, one Red, one Waratah, one Brumby, but I just think that they've played enough test rugby to know each other's game inside and out at test level. And Fassler for me He's just such a good all-round player. Plus, he also knows the Schmidt system, and he is someone that also, like Carlo Tizzano last year, really found his offensive game. He is a good carrier now, and he's bit of a wombat-esque player. He knows how to burrow in, so I really like that from Fassler. In the back row, I went through the stats earlier about what the second rows brought. Will Skelton and Williams for me. I can see it on the field. I can see it on the stats numbers. I just can't see any way that that power combination with the grunt and the engine from Williams, plus the effectiveness, size, and bulk from Skelton, boosting that front row, that's going to do some damage to a Fijian scrum that's also going to be very much on song. But a lot of the boys have played against each other from Super Rugby because a lot of them are coming from the Drua, especially particularly in the front row with Donge Hetet. And I do believe there is a kind of vary as well at hooker. Not Sam Matavisi, not so much, but they would have played each other before. And then in the back row, you've got Valentini, McReight, Wilson, the exact same as you. I think the combination of McReight and Wilson, absolute stellar. McReight, obviously, in so much great form towards the end of the season and the incumbent. And I do want to see him really succeeding and push on. And maybe he's just one of those players that, like Sia Khaleesi, club, not really his thing, then goes into the gold jersey or the green jersey for South Africa and absolutely kills it. So fingers crossed for that. Although Wilson, I didn't go through the stats earlier, Wilson doesn't necessarily have the most impressive stat page, but nonetheless, he leads by action and he is a leader within that space. And I think leadership, particularly for any test match, is going to be crucial. So Wilson absolutely in there. Valentini picks himself against his fellow Fijian countrymen. And then I've got Gordon Loloseo. That combination played most tests last year. Not an issue that they're not playing for the same club. They know how each other play now at the top level, and I think they're pretty comfortable with each other. I think Loloseo particularly has added a couple of meters or tens of meters to his boot over the last year. So I'm really excited to see what he can do from a tactical perspective, even tonight for the Brumbies. And then I've gone Paisami and Ikitau in the centres. I am nervous about... So, I should have said this at the start, but the side that Schmidt picks for this Fijian game, I think that 99.9% will carry over into the first test for the Lions, because they're trying to build cohesion. And I know that I love that you call them the Twickenham Terrors. That's freaking epic. Of Suli and Ikitau. But... for me, it really is about combination. And Ikitau and Paisami have played together under three coaches almost. Not under Eddie Jones, but during that era. And they've played a lot of tests together. So it's really, really important to allow those combinations to work. And defensively, I think they work really well. Which when you've got Hugh Jones, Sione Tuipulotu, Bundy Arki, Gary Ringrose coming at you through the channels, defense is going to be everything. And they know each other inside and out. Then you've also got Potter and Daungunu. I've put Daungunu on the open side wing just because I think that Potter is that kind of that sneaky, sly ninja type of fast winger, whereas Daungunu is a bit more open. Get him in there, get him in the rucks, allow him to play against his countrymen and absolutely wallop them. I wouldn't mind if he jammed a couple of times against Fiji, just for the vibes. And then right at fullback. But then if we head onto the bench, Pollard, Slipper, and Tupou. I need to see Tupou fire in that Fiji game, even if it's just the scrum. As you and I have discussed, it's going to be crucial for him to be able to nail his core roles, and that's going to be there. As for the same reasons that you said, Slipper, absolutely stellar. Pollard, he adds a running threat, as well as we know now he can score tries on the back of a maul like any good hooker can. Frost, for me, his height, work rate, and his ability to cover all back three, all two positions of the second row, plus number 6 at a pinch, really makes him a crucial member to have in a side where I've gone 5'3", not 6'2", and then I've gone Gleeson because we know that he steps up against the Fijian Drua, and I think that in a situation like this, although there are other players that may maybe fit that 20 jersey better, he plays so well against his countrymen in Super Rugby. I can't see why he doesn't deserve that shot against Fiji up in the Hunter there on the 6th of July. McDermott, Donaldson, and Suaalii. For me, Suaalii is the ideal 23 jersey wearing player. He can cover center, he can cover wing, he can cover fullback. And I know that a lot of people want to see the Ikitau and Suaalii combo in the centers. that may be the case second half. You know, you see Paisami go off, you see Ikitau shift in, and then you've got those two there. But I just worry about Suoli'i coming in to a test series. And obviously, this is just a separate test, but the test series where he's just a little bit undercooked, not having played a whole lot of rugby. So it remains to be seen how he is used. But I'd like to get your quick take on my side there. I know obviously we've picked different sides, but nonetheless, what did you make of the squad that the match day 23 that I chose?
Oh, mate, lots of similarities. So my argument is great minds, but the one that stuck out for me is the absence of Tom Hooper.
Mm.
I found that very interesting, and it's hard because Tom Hooper and Lange Gleeson both heading abroad. We know Joe Schmidt's position that he prefers players who are committed domestically. Yet we've found room for Skelton, so we've sort of flipped a coin on the high performing Hoopers and Gleesons. I think Gleeson is so impactful, but it's only from eight. And we've only seen it from eight. So, what happens if a McReight goes down in that team? That gives me some concern, especially with Tizzano's form. But in the same token, you've covered the back line much more in depth than I have with Ben Donaldson, who has been lining up at fullback and at 15 over the past 2 years, can perform both to a relatively high level. I love the idea of Suoli'i off the bench as well. I think he could do something terrifying. Think, Sonny Bill Williams circa 2015 replacing a Conrad Smith and turning the tide in games. Like there's so much to like about that as well. But the biggest difference for mine is Jake Gordon. We've seen through the news, obviously recording this on the 14th of June, that he's been slated as one of the key leaders, if not the leader, as reported by
Mm.
AAP. So much interest around that, and I think his exit game is the best by far of any of the halfbacks currently in Australia. We've seen how impactful that box kick is in clearance. So I think you're probably right with Gordon. The romantic in me loves the idea of Lonergan getting a shot, but for me, that is a more settled and sensible side. Maybe Joe Schmidt decides elsewhere. We'll just have to find out and see, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the captaincy call, which we haven't really debated about now, just obviously because we know so little, but in my squad, you've got Alan Alatoa, who could be a captain in that starting side. You've got Harry Wilson, who was the incumbent. You've got Jake Gordon, who's possible to be a captain as well. So that's three possible options. And then on the bench, you have McDermott coming off the bench. You have Slipper coming off the bench. They're two players that are going to be captain material. And then if we go back to your team, for the starting side, you've got Alan Alatoa as well there and Wilson. So they're the two captains. You can pick Lonergan. I'd be really surprised if he picked Lonergan and he also picked him as a captain. Like that'd be Liam Wright out of the clouds, like last year.
Oh, mate, that'd be
Although
bonkers.
I thought that Wright did deserve that, to be honest, because he was one of my favorite players, and I just hate to see him injured. Liam Wright that's number 6 for the Queensland Reds. And then you've got Slipper to be captain material, and you've also got McDermott. So you've got some coverage as well. It's going to be really interesting to see. And I think the main thing that you and I have taken away from this exercise, and I hope that a lot of the listeners have and the watchers have as well, is at how proud and how good we are stacked from a domestic perspective. Take us back 2, 3 years. We would have been putting in the conversations around Sean McMahon, Liam Gills, Tom Banks, Jack Maddox. You pick James Ram. You're putting all these kind of names in and around the pot. The Richie Arnolds of the world, the Pete Summer who's coming back. Obviously not mentioned in either of our squads. We think it's a little bit too soon. Maybe he plays that Waratahs game, but then again, probably not because might be in the final with Bordeaux for the French top 14, which doesn't end until I think the very last week of June, so next week. So I think that's really the key takeaway for us. It is super impressive that the Australian sides have been able to condense down at the unfortunate demise of the Melbourne Rebels, and we've seen a lot of talent being pushed through. We're not even talking about players like Rob Leota, who was once upon a time, slated as a classic bench player for the Wallabies, who's really powerful and really big. And I just think that players like Hooper, who we've included, and Gleeson, like you mentioned, so impressive in so much of what they did this season because they got a rocket and kick up the arse. But yeah, I'm just so happy that we're finally seeing some really fierce debate from just domestic based players.
Oh, mate, it's unreal. And I was going to ask, it's perfect segue that you've set up for yourself. Do you see a bolt from the blue from overseas? You know, you mentioned a couple of big names there, but I'm thinking more like the Marika Korobedes, the Bernard Foleys. Is there an SOS from Japan that you can see being brought in at any stage? I know you've already added in Karevi and Skelton. I've got Skelton as well. Who else might we see conceivably?
No, I think that's a really good call. We also failed to mention Matt Phillip as well from the Yokohama Eagles there in Japan. I do think that he'll definitely be part of the Wallabies conversation moving forward when Tom Hooper leaves, because all of a sudden you leave a little bit of an empty spot there for a second row option, and he is a second row out and out. He can't cover it. He can't cover back row necessarily. So. I do think that Bernard Foley is a really interesting conversation. I don't think he's done by any stretch of the imagination. I just like to see them come back to Super. I just think that it's like they've been in the wilderness for so long. And by wilderness, I mean not playing at like top tier. They're not playing Super. They're not playing URC, Prem, or French Top 14. That's honestly where I believe where the Premier Club competitions are at. MLR and Japan Rugby are a little bit of a different, not saying they're the same bracket, but they're a bit of a different bracket. So I'd like to see them come back. But I do think that you slot in a Bernard Foley there. He could do it, but I see that as a bit of a longer project than the Lions. Unfortunately, it's more so about systems. It's more so, you watch the Brumbies play well, you watch the Wallabies play well. It's all about systems. You don't need the best of the best 10. I do think Pete Samu will feature in Wallaby Gold this year. Matt Phillip, yes. But as far as an SOS goes out, Marika Korobetti has been bandied about. I think Christy Doran from the Raw mentioned him when he and Sam Bruce on the ESPN Scrum Reset podcast were talking about their squads. I just can't see Marika being any better than any of the wings we have right now. He's not as fast. I don't think he's as physical as some of the wingers that we have could be. He's been a great servant, and I don't count him out of ever featuring again in a gold jersey. I just don't see him. But are you seeing a Korobedi come back and featuring for this Lions tours?
No, I can't see big Marika coming back in. Like, I think almost Felipe Daugunu is the player that Marika, well, not is, because Marika's a two-time Johnny Oz medalist, but he's the style of player Marika used to be.
Absolutely, yeah.
He's physical. He's adding that punch. So, barring a catastrophic run of injuries, I don't think Marika's coming in. I honestly think that Kurtley Bill's more likely to feature in a wider squad than Marika, purely for his versatility, experience, and being able to come in and offer his time from the 2013, lots of ups, plenty of downs, as we know for Kurtley on that Suncorp turf. But I think that's another player that could, come into a training squad. No guarantees of a game. But so many ebbs and flows in Lions series. For goodness sake, we saw George Smith come back in the last one. So anything can happen. It makes it so exciting. And as we count down to Fiji, we're a week out from Lions against Argentina. It is rapidly approaching, and I can't wait to chew through every bit.
No, I'm so excited as well. And just on KB, we'll probably be talking a lot about the First Nations Pacifica game, which I hope he features heavily in, with along the likes of Tristan Riley and Andy Muirhead, because they are players who truly deserve to represent their culture, and they do it so proudly for their club teams and in their own lives as well. So we will talk about that. We'll talk about the AUNZ squad, the unofficial Anzac squad. But I think that's a wrap on this Wallabies deep dive for the squads coming up for the Fijian test. We've given you the things, what we say, where the players are going to be dropped for the Lions squad as well. We've given you a team that is likely to change due to injury, and there's a lot of rugby to be played before that. We've obviously got the Western Force in just 14 days, so in 2 weeks' time, playing the British and Irish Lions. Who knows who's going to emerge from that? Mac Greeley, another player we didn't really mention, but lots of chats for lots of different days. It's super exciting. But Lachie, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. You and the boys at Scrumbags do such a good job, and I'm liking this little rendezvous we have going with each other weekly, if not bi-weekly. So thank you so much for coming on, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Mate, absolutely. Stay tuned. Looking forward to doing a few more of these, particularly over the Lions series. So keep your eyes and ears peeled. Maybe not the eyes, we're not too easy on them, but looking forward to chatting with you very shortly, Fergo.
Cheers, Lachie, and all to you at home. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow along. I'll drop some links to Scrumbags as well in the description below. You can catch them on Instagram. I'm on TikTok as well with Off the Ruck, so be able to follow us there. And until the next time that we see each other, enjoy the Brumbies. Hopefully they go through the final, and we'll be talking lots of rugby on all our different channels. Until then, take care.